My name is Elaine Mercer, and on my 64th birthday, I learned what it costs to be polite. It happened in my own dining room, the house I deeded to my son when my knees started complaining about the stairs. The table was dressed like a magazine, linen runner, my mother's silver, a cake from that bakery everyone posts about. I had decided to keep the evening simple: roast chicken, asparagus, one bottle of red that pairs with almost anything because my palate is unsophisticated and happy to be so. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, slid in late with a murmured apology and the kind of smile that looks expensive. She lifted the Cabernet, set her glass beside my plate, and leaned in as if to hug me. The bottle tilted. A slow red sheet emptied over my dress. Warm as a blush I didn't ask for, I heard the silverware gasp. She didn't rush for towels. She watched the stain spread like it had been waiting for me. "Now you look as cheap as you are," she whispered, just for me, so that if I repeated it, I would sound petty or senile. I stood up so fast my chair kissed the floor. Caleb reached for napkins, bumping the cake box with a clumsy elbow. The room smelled like grapes, sugar, and embarrassment. I could have cried. Instead, I felt something calmer and far older wash through me, the sensation of a door unlocking in a house I had lived in for years without knowing there was another room. I smiled, the kind I used on clients who tried to renegotiate after signing. "Accidents happen," I said, enough for the guests to hear. I excused myself to change, and while I buttoned a plain black dress in my bedroom, I decided I was done being polite for free. I kept the party moving because I was raised to carry plates through a fire if guests are watching. The wine smell clung to the room like a rumor. We sang over a cake I no longer wanted, and people sliced themselves forgiveness in generous squares. Sloane dabbed at the table with a single paper towel as if the mess might bite. She never looked at me directly, which was fine. I had already seen enough. After the last guest left, I started a load of laundry and stared at the dress doing tired pirouettes under the washer light. My reflection in the little window looked like a woman practicing patience. The truth is, patience had turned me into furniture. I went upstairs and found Caleb in the hallway, arms folded, face tight with the effort of pretending nothing was wrong. "It was an accident, Mom," he said, way too quickly before I'd even opened my mouth. "Then why did she smile?" I asked. He blinked. "She didn't smile." "She did," I said. "I've been a woman longer than you've been alive. I know the difference between a mistake and a performance." He rubbed his temples. "You're making this bigger than it is." I looked at the small framed photograph on the console table. Caleb at 6, cheeks orange from popsicles, promising me he would always tell the truth. "What happened to the money I lent you last year?" I asked, voice level. 47,300 and some change. I have the exact number in my notebook. He flinched. "We said we'd talk about it later." "It's later," I said. "Is it paid back?" His silence had a shape. It looked like Sloane. He tried on a laugh that didn't fit. "We're fine." "Mom." "Are you?" I asked. "Because I've been paying the property tax on a house I no longer own, and I'm beginning to feel foolish instead of generous." His jaw worked. "Sloane handles most of our finances. She knows what she's doing." I remembered the way she'd watch the wine soak through silk like it was proof. "Then I'd like to see what she's done," I said. That night, once the dishwasher hummed and the neighborhood went to sleep, I sat at my desk and opened a new notebook, the thick kind with a ribbon to mark where you stopped pretending not to notice. I wrote the number I had given Caleb, each digit like a stepping stone. I made columns, dates, amounts, promises. The pages breathed around me. Somewhere downstairs, the washer clicked to a stop, and I felt the steady pulse of my own heart answering back, "Start here." I didn't break into any accounts or rummage through drawers. I did what women my age do best. I called people who had known me for years and had no reason to lie. At the bank, a manager I've known since he was a teller explained what he could without breaking rules. There had been withdrawals just under 5,004 in a single month, a style favored by people who try to keep flags from tripping alarms. At the community center where I volunteer, I asked the director about a grant Sloan had once said she was writing. He remembered a presentation with big fonts and small math, followed by nothing. At Caleb's office lobby, I bumped into his supervisor, who told me, with the concerned tone reserved for weather and divorces, that Caleb had been distracted lately, missing small things he never missed. I didn't accuse. I collected. I put it all in the notebook and left white space between the entries, like hallways between rooms, so air could move and I could see what I was building. When I asked Caleb to dinner, I chose a diner with vinyl booths and waitresses who called you honey without meaning anything by it. I brought the notebook. He brought the version of himself who used to take the blame for broken windows even if he hadn't been home that day. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here so we can both stop drowning quietly." He stared at the coffee like it might answer for him. "I know about the withdrawals," I said. "I know about the credit cards in my name that I didn't open. I've placed fraud alerts. I'm filing a police report tomorrow because I would rather look foolish in front of a stranger than be bled dry by family." His eyes shot up, hurt first, then anger, then a smaller, truer fear. "Sloan will never forgive you," he said, like a warning. "Then we'll all survive something," I said. "I will not be the soft ground she keeps testing with her heel." He swallowed. The waitress refilled coffee we hadn't touched. "You don't know her," he said, but his voice didn't have conviction, just habit. "I know she whispered a sentence designed to make me doubt my worth," I said. "I know you didn't hear it. I know what happens to women who swallow insults like vitamins. They get very healthy at disappearing." He exhaled slowly. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to decide who you are when no one is watching," I said, "and I want you to come with me tomorrow." The next morning, we sat on the plastic chairs at the precinct under a poster about scams that felt uncomfortably on brand. I spoke plainly. I gave dates, amounts, facts. The officer asked if I felt threatened. I thought of the wine, the smile, the way the house felt smaller lately, as if someone had been measuring it for their own furniture. "Yes," I said, "but not of the kind you can photograph." We left with a case number and instructions. Outside, the air had that crisp Ohio bite that makes you feel awake whether you want to be or not. Caleb shoved his hands in his pockets. "She'll be furious," he said. "She already is," I replied. "Now she'll be furious at the right thing." That night, he didn't go home. He took the guest room and slept like a boy who finally confessed to the principal. In the morning, Sloan's texts stacked on his phone like tickets under a windshield wiper. He stared at them for a long time and put the phone face down. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded. The first thing he did after the second sip was cry. Quietly, like a man too tired to pretend he wasn't human. I put my hand over his and felt, for the first time in months, the shape of my son under the armor he'd been issued by someone else. Sloan arrived at noon with the kind of knock that announces itself to the whole block. She came in without waiting to be invited, heels stabbing at the hardwood like punctuation. Her eyes skipped over me and landed on Caleb. She lifted her chin in a way I recognized from expensive dogs. "You didn't come home," she said. "I needed time," he answered. "To do what?" she said, not as a question. "Practice betraying me?" Caleb's shoulders curled a fraction, old reflex. I stepped between them because I pay the taxes and because I'm done letting rooms decide who I am. "Lunch?" I asked. "I made sandwiches." She laughed. You filed a police report on your own family and you think I'm staying for ham on wheat? I think you're leaving, I said, and I heard the new steadiness in my voice, a timbre that belonged to me even when I was 20 and poor and certain I'd never be more than useful. You can talk to Caleb at your place, not here. Her gaze slid to the doorway as if she was calculating the distance to victory. This is our house. It's the house the county records say belongs to my son, I said. You are a guest of a guest, which is a delicate category. Color rose under her makeup. She took one step toward me, then reconsidered. You won't win, she said softly, and this time she didn't bother to hide the threat. You don't know what you started. I did, actually. The thing about being 64 is you've started and finished more fires than most people remember. The smoke eventually clears. The smell lingers long enough to teach you something. After she left, Caleb sat on the bottom stair and stared at nothing. She'll make this ugly, he said. She'll make herself, I corrected, and we will refuse to decorate it. The next weeks were an education in endurance. There were messages, then messages from numbers with no names. There was a dead fish smell coming from the garage that turned out to be a bag of shrimp left in an unplugged freezer. A window screen was sliced in a neat square, like a geometry problem. I documented everything. I didn't fight fire with fire. I bought a small fireproof safe for the paperwork and installed cameras with the help of a neighbor who collects gadgets, like other people collect heirloom tomatoes. Caleb moved through the house like a man learning its map again. He started going to therapy on Tuesdays. He opened his own credit monitoring account and called the bank himself. He bought me a phone with an emergency button I could press without unlocking it, which made him feel useful in a way that didn't extract anything from me. One night, the doorbell rang at 2:11. We watched the camera feed on my phone, breath held in the dark. A person in a hoodie stood too close to the lens, then turned and stared at the driveway as if listening to someone we couldn't hear. The figure left. The next morning, we found gasoline poured in a lazy curve near the back steps, like someone had practiced and lost their nerve. I called the detective and handed him the footage. He nodded slowly in a way I didn't enjoy. 2 days later, the nerve returned. I smelled it first, that sharp, sweet whisper in the air that makes your body remember ovens and summer. I looked out the kitchen window and saw a tongue of flame licking the mulch by the fence. It was small, absurdly manageable, like a teenager's first lie. I grabbed the extinguisher and killed it before it found breath. The neighbors came running. Someone called 911 anyway. The fire department arrived and made sure we hadn't missed anything glowing under the surface. One firefighter, young enough to be my grandson and kind enough to be my son, asked if anyone might want to scare us. I can give you a list, I said, but I only need one name. The detective came back with more questions, then with news, then with the kind of apology men make when they realize they've underestimated the quietest person in the room. The person on our camera had a record for petty arson and a baby cousin who dated Sloan in high school. It took a day to trace the cousin's number to a series of cash apps and a recent flurry of activity. The detective did not say the word hired, because hired would require a level of professionalism absent from the clownish reality of our situation. He said arranged, "It sounded like flowers delivered to the wrong funeral." They picked up the kid at a gas station, where he had the misfortune of paying with a card and the good fortune of confessing when he realized the math wasn't on his side. He typed a message for the detective that I wasn't supposed to see but did. She said, "Make it small," just enough to scare her. Hearing it phrased so simply rearranged something in me. I had known I was meant to be frightened. I hadn't realized I was supposed to be smaller afterward. The arrest warrant for Sloan came on a Wednesday. She was booked on conspiracy, harassment, and a set of charges with names that sounded more dramatic than my life had any right to be. Caleb didn't speak for a long time after the call. Then he sat at my kitchen table and cried the way people cry when they finally know the shape of the monster under the bed and can stop inventing shadows. The legal procession that followed was not a parade. It was a slow, uncomfortable march, with shoes that blistered. There were hearings and continuances and the kind of scheduling conflicts that make you hate calendars. I showed up in my black dress, not the one from my birthday, a different black, sensible and clean. I brought my notebook, now thick with copies and tabs, bank statements, screenshots, timestamps, a receipt for a 5-gallon gas can purchased with cash at a hardware store she had posted selfies in. Sloane sat at the defense table with a jaw that belonged to a statue. She glanced at me once and looked away like she'd seen a mirror in a store window and disliked the lighting. When the young man took the stand and told the story of his poor choices, the courtroom exhaled as a unit. He did not make Sloane sound like a mastermind. He made her sound like what she was, a person who wanted control more than love and imagination, more than consequences. Caleb testified last. He told the truth with the tired dignity of someone who wants very badly to earn an ordinary day. He spoke about the withdrawals he had ignored because life had already asked too much of him, and he'd parceled out the ignoring like it might last longer if he rationed it. He said he was sorry. Not to the court, to me. It wasn't theatrical. It was a sentence shaped like a bridge we could walk on. By the time closing arguments ended, I had stopped shaking. I thought of that night in my bedroom with the black dress and the button that stuck. How small one decision looks when you are making it. How large it becomes once it begins to carry weight. The verdict had fewer syllables than the attention it took to get there. Guilty. The sentence measured years the way we measure winters, 12 of them, which is not forever but is also not a season you sleep through. The judge recommended counseling and restitution. The clerk recorded a number that looked unfamiliar until I realized it was mine, returned to me in print before it would ever arrive in a check. When it was over, Sloane's attorney touched her arm. She didn't look at him. She looked past me, through me, at some future in which I hadn't existed. I walked out into the afternoon and felt the sun land on my face like permission. The house did not feel safer overnight. It felt quieter in a way that allowed safety to consider moving in. We replaced the scorched mulch and painted the back steps. The camera by the door still catches rabbits and the occasional raccoon with ambitions. The fireproof safe holds fewer papers now and more birthday cards because I like the poetry of that. Caleb comes for dinner most Sundays. He eats more slowly than he used to, which is another way of saying he has learned to taste what he is consuming. He paid the first installment of restitution with the earnestness of a Boy Scout returning a lost wallet. He told me his therapist says shame is useful only as a smoke alarm. You listen to it, you don't live in it. I told him my mother would have called that wisdom and then baked a pie to make sure you remembered it. On my next birthday, we kept the guest list short enough to fit around the kitchen table. I wore a black dress from a thrift store, $50 and perfect. I bought a bottle of red because I refused to let fear choose my menu. When someone offered to pour, I did it myself. Steady hand, level glass. We ate roast chicken and asparagus out of sheer defiance and because I make both well. After cake, when the plates had surrendered to crumbs and contentment, Caleb stood to make a toast. He doesn't do speeches. He stands when it matters. To my mother, he said, and he paused long enough to make me nervous. For teaching me that love without boundaries isn't love, it's a leak. People laughed in that relieved way that means they agree. I tried to roll my eyes so the room wouldn't get blurry. It didn't work. I went to the sink, rinsed the knife, stacked plates, moved like the woman I am. Practical. Soft in the places that matter. Firm in the places that keep the roof intact. There is a myth that revenge tastes like someone else's tears. In my experience, it tastes like clean water and a night of sleep with the window open. It tastes like putting on a $50 dress and liking it more than the expensive one because it doesn't care what spills. When guests left and the house returned to its regular breathing, I carried my empty wine glass to the porch. The gift Caleb had brought sat on the table beside me, wrapped in brown paper like a secret keeping itself simple. I opened it with the care you reserve for anything that might become an heirloom. Inside was a notebook like mine, only new. On the first page he had written, in his blocky hand, "Start here, when you need to remember who you are." I laughed because I am not likely to forget again, not because I am immune to the soft gravity of politeness or the habit of making myself small to fit a room. I laughed because there will be other rooms and I intend to meet them at my size. Sometimes, when the house is very quiet and the night tries on a colder voice, I think of Sloane in a place where doors lock from the outside. I don't relish it. I don't pretend it doesn't matter. I file it next to the truth that saved me. The best revenge is not a performance. It's a life you can explain to yourself without wincing. The fair thing about justice is not that it erases what happened. It's that it sets a boundary around it, like a fence around a garden so the rabbits know to admire and not devour. I plant tomatoes now. I label them with popsicle sticks like a child because I like the earnestness of it. When they ripen, I give half to the neighbor with the gadgets. I keep the other half and make sauce the slow way, with a wooden spoon and music from the decade when I thought 40 was old. And sometimes, between stirring the sauce and tasting it, I look out the window at the rebuilt fence and realize something quietly astonishing. I am not surviving anymore. I am living. And for the first time in years, that feels like more than enough. There are evenings when the wind carries laughter from another yard, and for a fleeting second, I imagine it's the version of me who stayed silent at that birthday table. Then I smile, because even she had to exist for this one to be born. The world hasn't gotten kinder, but I have gotten stronger. And that is its own kind of miracle. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family, drama, and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.